Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our second Twin Cities Film Fest Empower Roundtable, sponsored by Vuma TV. I am Ms. Shannon, a proud host and member here at the Twin Cities Film Fest, and I am excited to bring you our second iteration of these Empower Roundtables, where what we're doing is basically trying to give a deeper conversation about a lot of the diversity that goes into our creative community. So first of all, thank you to all of our filmmakers that were on our first Empower Roundtable, and now a preemptive thank you to all of our guests today who are joining us for today's discussion on diverse screenwriting. So we have some very accomplished and a variety of genre-based diverse screenwriters who are joining us today. So I'm going to start with Donna Mosley. So Donna, I'm very excited to meet you because not only are you a screenwriter, but I also am very fascinated by the fact that you focus on what seems to be sci-fi action and that horror genre. I am a geek by nature. I actually have a podcast where I talk about all of the typical geekly things. So as a woman who knows how difficult it is sometimes to break out in this field, I applaud you. So thank you for joining us, Donna. So how did you decide that this is the genre that you wanted to really focus on right now in your career path?
Mostly because I have two boys and a husband, and this is what we watch.
Right.
So
yeah.
I love it. I grew up, I love Star Trek, Star Wars, and at first I tried to be, when I was looking at, oh, what do I want to write about? Different dramas and comedy. And then I thought, this is just where I naturally end up. So that's what I'm going to do.
Right. Well, I applaud you. I think it's fantastic, especially when you're talking about a genre that, you know, we have to be honest, was one that was really predominantly written from that white male gaze perspective for a long time. And we notice is getting a lot of pushback still as we try to transition. So have you felt a need to be even more bold and outspoken about the pieces that you're creating?
I actually do, just because it's, and this is just from the mechanics of screenwriting. It's like, do you call out the color of your characters? Do you name them? That's the casting director's job. I mean, all of these things that I've had to wrestle with just to create these worlds and say, hey, these characters are people of color. This is this. And so it's been kind of a journey.
Right. Well, I appreciate what you do, and I can't wait to talk to you more about that particular idea of how you create those characters later during our conversation. Also joining us today, Mr. Alan W. Porter. I say that because when I go to your website, Alan, I want to make sure people find you, that it's Alan W. Porter. And it is fantastic. You see the depth of work that you've worked on over the years and a number of award-winning screenplays that you've done. So when you were deciding how you were going to focus your work, how do you kind of narrow it down?
I really don't. And I think you can see that from my website. I think just like Donna, I'm a blurred. I'm a black nerd for sure. Love sci-fi, love horror, but as you said, it's not the most diverse area. And I got to give a shout out to Jordan Peele for kind of opening up the genre for us as screenwriters. But I'll withhold all that praise until somebody turns one of Octavia Butler's books into a film. That's what we need to see, something like that. But, you know, I'm from Iowa originally. My whole family's from Iowa. I've lived all over the country, South Central LA, East Coast, all of that. So I've got what I think is a fairly unique perspective about what it is to be in the majority in South Central and the minority in Des Moines, Iowa. So I tend to look at things broadly. But when I first started writing, I realized it was tougher to write a Black story because everything I'd seen was, especially in the sci-fi and horror genres, was told from a white perspective. And not till I wrote my first screenplay, where I just decided to write what I knew, did I decide this is going to be an African-American male character, and he is clearly going to be that character because we're writing about sort of a fish out of water, Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court sort of drama. And so once I got comfortable with the fact I didn't care what the casting director thought. Then it sort of gave me an ability to just write what I wanted to write and write the things I wanted to watch.
Right, right. Well, I appreciate that. And how do you determine when you're writing something? And one of the things I noticed was how many awards, how many festivals, a variety of things that your work has been showcased in. How do you have the time to create the works and then find all of the ways to get the amazing accolades that you deserve? But is that time consuming, Alan?
Yes,
Okay.
I have a 10-year-old, and
Ah.
he is on the spectrum. And
Okay.
so as he gets older, he takes less of my time.
Okay.
But I give more of my time. He's more
Right.
fun to hang out with as they get older. That seems to
Right.
happen. But
Yeah.
it's one of those things where you do what you do, and then at about 9 o'clock, when the house starts to slow down a little bit, you
Yep.
sink into this chair and you look up, and it's 2 a.m. But that world you create is hopefully so engaging and so enticing that it's a second set of friends, and I don't notice the time I put into the work.
Right.
Honestly, I've discovered it in my life that research creates more character than anything else I've come across. The more I research about a topic, the more I learn about it, which lets me hopefully create more in-depth characters and a more intricate world as I know a lot more about it. So, and I like to tell myself, my wife disagrees, but I tell myself I'm not particularly creative. I consider myself more of an architect, because
Okay.
screenwriting is a craft as well as an art. And so it's my nature to try to master the craft, and hopefully through research and paying attention to my environment, I will come up with the creative elements to create a world that people want to know about.
And Alan, I've just met you and I have not met your wife at all, but I feel like I agree with her. I think that you are a very creative person from everything that I've
Thank you.
seen. So thank you very much. And also thank you very much for sharing about your son. Anybody who knows me knows that I also have a son that's on the spectrum. He's 12. So we applaud you for being a champion for that as well. They are amazing little onions, our kids on the spectrum. Amazing, complex little onions. So thank you very much, Alan. I can't wait to hear more about that as well. Moving on, one of our esteemed guests today, David Lawrence Grant. So David, I wanted to talk to you because not only are you also an amazing creative, but you are brave enough to actually teach other people this concept, and you've done a ton of things. You know, I see your name pop up all the time when I'm at the Loft and other places like that. So thank you for everything you do. So how do you go, not only am I going to make my own work, I'm going to share this with students and get other people to come into this world and start creating their own stories?
Well, it's just a natural extension of not only writing, but really everything else I do.
Okay.
Right? I mean, I was raised with an ethic that said, you know, like my grandfather used to say, son, you know, have a good look around wherever you're at, and then figure out what you can do, right?
Makes
Because in
sense,
some
yeah.
way you can serve in every situation. And I come from a long line of teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was just sort of a natural thing. I didn't have to think about it. I'd always felt myself moving in that direction, twin directions. I knew from an early age that I was going to be a writer.
Mm-hmm.
I identified as a writer. And I also knew that on some level and in some way, maybe in many different ways, I would wind up teaching too.
Okay.
You know, it wasn't as much of a conscious choice as it was, I had to look at where my feet were headed and just nodded in agreement. What else could I do? Right?
Well, thank you so much for doing that. I mean, I know especially as we go at the time when we're making this recording, we have just started the schools here in a lot of our markets, specifically here in the Twin Cities. And so I know how important it is to have that person that puts your feet on the right path and encourages you to do all these things. So thank you for, on behalf of all of the students that you've worked with over the years and the people that will be able to meet you in the future. So I really appreciate all that. And now we move on to our additional guest today and talk about a storied past. Talk about putting your toe into a lot of different creative waters. Mr. Peter Lord Moreland, hello. I applaud so much of the work that you do because my background is I started as a music DJ. for years. So I really appreciate so much of what you did, because a lot of people may not know how much you created a lot of some of our favorite pop songs, along with doing what you do as a screenwriter. So you are so broadly talented. So when you are telling a story, and I'll say a lot of the songs you were creating as well, when you're telling a story, regardless of what genre you're doing, how do you decide here's the beginning, middle, and end of this piece of work, Peter?
Interesting. Thank you for bringing up my sordid past.
I said storied, not sordid.
I'm sorry. I think the connection was bad. Okay.
What?
And I'm already mad at Alan because he stole my architect line. So I don't. That was my. You screenwriters. Yeah, the thing is, is that coming from a world of music and songwriting and record producing, and then making that transition into screenwriting and becoming a filmmaker, I think I approach it from two standpoints: holistic and as an anarchist, in that it's just there's certain connections between, I realize, stories that you tell in the context of time.
Okay.
So a song a screenplay and a story has to do the same thing as a song. You're carrying the listener or the viewer along, and the main thing is don't bore them. And as you can combine that with the sense that structure is freedom and not your enemy, you just bring those. I see, Alan, I got that line from you, so I'm sorry. But once you do that, and then the thing is, it's interesting that, like early on as a songwriter, I would start off ideas and I wouldn't finish them. But then I said to myself, oh, if I start with the hook first, then I know where I'm going. And just in terms of screenwriting, if you know what your hook or your story and that sense of structure is, then it comes along. That's not a prison for you. So just to answer your question, it's just a matter of being moved by a moment. And some of the things I do are very connected to music. There are several musical projects, though when I say musical, don't think what most people might think of first, but we won't get into that subject. That's another matter. I'll give that speech later. But some things have nothing to do with music. So it's just about, again, the storytelling, what stories move you, and touch you and build from there.
Well, I was very excited when they asked me to moderate this diverse screenwriters conversation. And I'm glad that you're here, Mr. Grant, because I thought that I should probably start with a definition of screenwriting and script writing, because I feel like some people are like, okay, what do they do? And I think that's unfortunate. And that's part of what I want to bring up today. So the one that I found that I thought we'd start with is screenwriting or script writing is the art and craft of writing scripts for mass media, such as feature films, television productions, or video games, is what they put in this particular definition. And then they say it is often a freelance profession. Do you find this definition to hold true? Is that pretty much where we start, and then we can build on that during this conversation?
Well, certainly, like Alan said, it is both an art and a craft. Okay. No doubt about that. But it's certainly broader than the definition that you found there, although that definition isn't bad.
Okay.
I mean, people who are seriously interested in screenwriting as a career, though, should know that we have a very, very strong union, a guild, which, gives us, gives our tribe sort of a central focus and support system and support network. And so you're not out there in the wind as a solo artist and freelancer, once you become a member of the guild. You've got somebody watchdogging whether you're getting paid in a timely fashion, whether you're getting paid enough. They provide the best health insurance I've ever had, a pension, you know, interest groups so that writers can get together and talk about common issues and find our way towards the collective solution of common problems. So, you know, I mean, that's a very important piece to put on the table. And then there's a national organization called the Organization of Black Screenwriters,
Okay.
which is very helpful. And within the guild, I'm not aware of Pacific and you know, Asian Pacific Islander group that is entirely independent, but there is a very large interest group at the guild. Latinx writers are highly organized at the guild and put on monthly events for one another, provide each other mutual support. So it definitely is not a lonely road, you know, that you have to walk all by yourself. There's lots of support out there for you if you look around and find it. But the basic definition is pretty sound.
Okay.
I gotta say, you know, in addition to the world of gaming, I mean, I was at the very first national conference back in 1988 or 89, where game producers brought writers to the table, as far as I know, for the very first time, in recognition of the fact that it was programmers and you know, the designers of games who were writing all the scripts. As games got more and more complicated, and as the storytelling in the game environment got more and more complicated, they looked around and realized, hey, we need to bring some writers to the table because we are not writers. We really don't, you know, we're writing trash. Let's be honest, right? So let's get ourselves some screenwriters involved. And it was amazing to see that far back. The signposts were pointing so clearly toward the world we have today.
Right.
Those folks had anticipated so many of the aspects of the tech that has become second nature to us now.
Right. And I just thought that's fabulous. That's part of the reason why I wanted to make sure I still included that video game is that, so I've noticed that different, where there's some games that I don't have the skill set to play well, but I still, because I only want to know the story. And so I'll just cheat. I'll go on YouTube because there's always somebody that's better at the game than I am, and they'll just put the cut scenes together, and I can watch it like a movie. Like that's, you know, like the example I use is the game The Witcher. I'm terrible at that game, but I wanted to know what happened, so I just watched the story unfold. And so I'm glad that, you know, that's something that we showcase, because so much of what, you know, when we're looking into what it is to be a screenwriter, do you, each of you, feel like you end up being the unsung hero of a really fantastic product?
Well, what do you say, folks?
Yeah, well, I mean, the thought that came to mind, again, it goes back to the point that Alan had made about the architect. And we're the architect, and we understand that if we're not directing or actually line producing, you know, we're not actualizing the vision, but we are the foundation of the vision. And again, not to get locked into music world, but in terms of, you know, people say, well, why when you want to do certain things, of what the screenwriter is like, some people might want to be a star and be out there, but screenwriters have, in their own little quiet ego, can allow themselves to become a universe.
Okay.
So they can create the worlds, and if they're comfortable with that, because everybody, it's like, I realized, just in terms of my own journey, that I just say, and not to talk about Minnesota in any way, one of my favorite artists, but I knew I didn't want to come out in a bikini on stage. All right. Plus I'm 6'5", so I wouldn't look as good as Prince anyway. But anyway. But I knew I wanted to tell those big stories and vision, and that was satisfying enough for me to produce and to fulfill whatever internal ego, or not even just but the need to express myself, or express ourselves as screenwriters. We're creating worlds, and I think for all of us that's enough. We don't have to be in front of the unless that's a different urge.
Right.
You're right.
Because then when you are creating these worlds, how much control can you expect to have over your works and the stories you created?
Mm.
Does it vary from project to project, or do you create them and then you just hope that whoever takes them on next treats them kindly?
Well, I can jump in here. I think
Okay.
that when I am creating a world or a project that comes just specifically from me and not an adaptation, I really embrace the collaborativeness of film. When I started out, you know, I wanted to do stage plays, and then I wanted to be a novelist. And when I started studying screenwriting, it just blew me away. It was really seductive in the simplicity of the format, but it's actually not as easy as the screenplay format makes it look. And then just working on set on different films, you see how things evolve. You don't have to know every answer, every thing, but like Peter was saying, being the architect, being that foundation, it's gratifying in and of itself. And if you feel strongly about something and actually want to produce or direct and have more control of a certain product, you can always, you know, go ahead and embrace that too.
Okay. Well, as we are talking about the diversity that's in these different genres, when you create these worlds, do you have to over explain because you're worried that it won't be interpreted? Or as you're saying, is it usually collaborative enough that they'll come back to you and go, well, what did you mean here, so that they can help create your vision?
Oh, I get lots of questions. Sorry.
Oh, you get lots of questions. Okay. Okay.
The world of gaming is a lot more like working in television. Television is very writer driven.
Okay.
And so writers get supreme respect in television and in gaming, but in feature film it's different.
Okay.
There it's really still a director's medium. And but the wonderful thing is that the culture of feature films has changed a lot since the 70s and 80s. And there's a much bigger spot for the writer at the table now than there used to as a collaborator. So yeah, we've actually come a long way. So that collaborative nature of creation and production that Donna was talking about is it's exhilarating. And I would say it's almost as strong now in the feature film world as it, you know, has always been in television.
Well, let's talk about that road then. So let's go back a bit and go, all right, when I'm starting the journey, and let's shoot back to, you know, is it too early if I go, let's say we're talking to a college freshman who thinks that screenwriting is what they want to do, but they're not sure. What are the first questions they should ask themselves to go, how do I decide that this is the path I should start on?
My only thought is not so much directly related to screenwriting, but into anything you might want to do in the arts. And that is, do you take no's as fuel?
Okay.
And like we were speaking about issues with Zoom and stuff before we started, I may not be able to screw in a light bulb. I don't have a lot of practical talents, to ask my wife. However, I do have a little bit of the Michael Jordan gene in me. That every no I hear is I use as fuel. And as long as, and I'm gonna keep this clean, as long as I realize that I may suck, but maybe I don't, and that half of the opinions that you receive from people about your work has as much to do with them as it has to do with you.
Okay.
So, and once you realize that, and particularly in quote unquote Hollywood, is that you come to realize past a certain level of competence, they're not even deciding if they like your work. They're deciding if they like you.
Okay.
Okay. So having said that, to answer your question about new screenwriters, is that, you know, again, be willing to, you know, hear those no's, but use them as fuel. Listen to the comments that come to you, and if there's a consistency, like everybody says, oh, I don't like page 34, then you might need to look at page 34. You know. Or like I have a sister who's a writer, not a screenwriter, but she writes also. But Um, and I was speaking to this director, well known, and my sister didn't like the beginning, and loved the end. The other guy loved the beginning and wasn't sure about the end. Now, I didn't necessarily agree about their points, but but you almost have to filter through and think and hear what they're really saying. You know, when you hear a critique, and for new screenwriters, they just have to be able to use what they need to use and let go what they don't need to use also.
Okay.
And just and again, but be fueled by no's, not totally, rejected and discouraged.
Right.
That's always great advice. You're right.
Mm-hmm. And Alan, I don't want to misquote your tagline on your website. So what is it? It's like Alan W. Porter, I'm a guy who writes things. Is that what you have?
Yep.
So how do you, when people are trying to decide how they would target and hire a screenwriter, what do you as that screenwriter do to prepare yourself for that? Like, what do I need to have in my CV or clips, or how do I get into the industry that way?
Well, as basically an unproduced screenwriter, I honestly would have to say, if I knew, I would be doing it. So I've been at this since 1999, and fairly recently decided to do my own web series because at 52 years old, I realize in some ways, if you're not in, you may not get in, because there is still some ageism in Hollywood. And when their target market is 18 to 25-year-old males, you may not necessarily have stories that you want to tell that are in that realm. And so realizing that, I just sat down and wrote a pilot and then cut it up into 6 individual episodes, started casting, and made some really good connections with some people who could actually get some things done. One of whom, not to name drop, is Sean Daly, Slug from Atmosphere, who's just a wizard, not only one of the smartest people I've ever met, but extremely well connected. And he just said, hey, I think you should go ahead and you should just start making your own web series. And so that's what I'm doing. So a lot of the experiences other folks might have about, like Donna had mentioned, being on set, I'm just now experiencing and then enjoying the collaborative nature of the filmmaking process. I've been very lucky to surround myself with extremely talented people who I trust to help me realize my vision. And I think that's important to recognize, that it is a collaborative medium. Otherwise, you're going to be doing that old Bugs Bunny cartoon where he plays the first baseman, second baseman, is pitching, is catching. And it's probably not a good idea. There are people who are probably better at many things than we are. Let's let them do what they do best. While we always have that benefit, we get to create the world, and that's enough from my perspective to do that. So.
Right. Well, I think it's interesting that you talked about those connections. So as a screenwriter, if you're, how important is that networking aspect to your field?
I think it's very important because, for better or worse, Hollywood is about connections. It's not always about talent. I mean, how often have you sat down and watched a movie, or actually gone out on a website, downloaded a script and thought, I could have done this, or I could do as well or better? Sometimes it's not about who's best. It's not necessarily a merit-based society. Sometimes it's who knows whom and who's in front of whom at the right time. They can't hire people they've never met. And that's the reality of it. Things like contests are helpful in making some connections, but at the end of the day, you've got to put in the legwork. I think, like David mentioned, talking to and going to places and meeting with people who are putting together video games. That's a wonderful niche to get into, but they probably didn't reach out to David and go, hey, we've heard of you, come do this. David took the initiative. He put in his hustle, and that's a lot of what this business is, putting in that hustle. And to Peter's point, not taking no, because there are a lot of no's. To circle back to your question about a college freshman, I would say that's paramount on the list. What Peter says, just use it as fuel. Never get too high or too low.
Right.
And just keep doing what you do. But I would also say, in addition to that, recognize that you might be a brilliant artist, but it's also a craft, and you're not going to be good the first time you do it. There's a
Gotcha.
learning curve, and thank goodness for people like David who are teaching folks how to work the craft side and not leaving out the fact that networking is a huge component of your success.
Right. I'm glad you came that up because I'm glad you brought that up, Alan, because I did have a couple of questions on how can fledgling screenwriters or even like mid-level screenwriters, what is the path to improve your skills in this industry?
Well,
We've got people on here who can answer that.
There we go. Exactly.
I mean, there are multiple paths, and both Alan and Peter, you've touched on several of them. But one is, I mean, if you're learning to become a good novelist, one of the strongest things you can do for yourself is to read lots of novels, right? I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer, but that's very, very true in this world of screenwriting.
Okay.
So read lots and lots and lots of screenplays, and especially read the older classic stuff from the 60s and 70s and 80s. Because unfortunately, a lot of the students I have these days, they're reading scripts, but they're reading scripts that have been produced in the last decade or so.
Okay.
And as an old school guy, you know, I'm dismayed at kind of the crazy habits that have crept into screenwriting, right?
Wow. Okay.
That are really pretty bad.
Yeah.
So, you know, I encourage people to read lots of screenplays. But the other thing I encourage people to do is, if you don't buy a subscription, then get the free subscriptions to the weekly and monthly trades.
Okay.
Read Variety every week, read Hollywood Reporter every week, so that you know what's going on, who's making deals with whom, and who out there who's in the producing world has an aesthetic that is in any way a good fit with yours.
Yes.
Right? Because part of the way you organize staying on your hustle, as Alan was talking about, is paying minute attention to what's going on where, and where can I plug into some things.
Right.
So you should be going to special events and receptions and screenings and hanging out and talking with people afterwards.
Right.
Right? Making it your business. I've known so many people who are talented writers over the years, but they've got no stomach for the chase.
Yeah.
You know, they'll in their office, and a lot of us are extrovert introverts, right? And we crave that downtime and alone time. But you have to create a habit of getting out there and interacting with people who not only might be able to help you, but who you also might be able to help. Because this cuts both ways.
Right.
And you know, building good karma out there. You know, when somebody has stepped up and asked you for a favor, and you've done it, and you've done it cheerfully, you've made connections between people, they remember that.
Right.
And out of the blue, you'll have people calling you saying, "Hey, brother, you were so good to me last year. You know, you hooked me up with so and so and so and so. What's going on? What are you working on?"
Right.
They may have made some connections that will be extremely helpful to you right now. But see, if you hadn't done those favors for them back in the day, they wouldn't be here offering to do you a favor now. And I mean, this is the truth. This is how so many good things happen for us, right? And I would be remiss, I'm not shilling for them, but for instance, very soon we have the Catalyst Conference happening online. This is an amazing opportunity because, as Alan was saying, one of the strategies that you have to seriously think about pursuing is just getting your feet wet, learning tools of production, and jumping in there with both feet and just doing it. You can do your own work for $1.25 now. You know, the rule, the old paradigm used to be that it was so hard for us to get our hands on the tools of production because it's also expensive. Renting a light kit, renting a camera, you know, calling in favors for everybody you know who knows production and getting them to come together in one place at one time. You can make a very credible, good-looking film on your cell phone these days. You know, you really can. And so there's just no excuse for not jumping in there, getting together with a few friends and doing some work and putting it up.
Right.
You can see it, right?
Yeah.
The more you know about how things get translated from the page to the screen, the better your toolkit as a writer becomes.
And I'm glad you brought up the Catalyst Story Road people. We work with them here at the Twin Cities Film Fest too. And the same thing, and I agree with you that you don't know what you don't know until you know to ask a question.
Exactly.
And that's something I've had to learn in my career too. And I do talk to the folks over at Catalyst, and they are fantastic at going, oh, here's the gap. And so do you think that that's part of it too, is going, you being open to, yes, you're a very creative person, yet here's a way that you can improve your skill set.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I feel every once in a while like the coach of some hard-headed kid, right? Who in basketball, I see him come in, he's got all kinds of flashy skills on the court, but you got to learn the game, son. Right? It's not just about you hot dogging the ball and impressing the hell out of everybody, you know, with your hook. And the fact that you can dunk, you know, cool, that's great. But learn the game of basketball, son, right? And where you fit in and how your toolkit can be put to the service of getting a team win.
Okay.
Right. And so, yes, I see talented writers come through, you know, all the time, whether it's a formal class or I'm doing a one-day seminar on writing better dialogue or whatever. And they're feeling themselves a little too much.
Yeah.
They do have mad skills, some of them, but I'm like, look, you got to slow down and take a look at the whole picture and learn to become good at all of it. Right. Including developing a really good tool for self-analysis, for critically looking at your own stuff and being able to tell pretty accurately, okay, is this good enough or is it not? Right. And if it's not, what do I need to do to make it better? And when you start asking yourself those questions, that's when you know, hey, maybe I'm actually starting to get good. Okay. Right? So yeah, it's a process and it takes a while. I've been at this for a long time, and you know what? I'm still getting better as a writer. I'm a better writer. Well, you know, it's like one of my heroes, Muhammad Ali, once said, you know, if you see the world the same way at 40 as you did at 20, you have somehow wasted 20 years of your life. And so it's like that in terms of continuing to develop all the tools that you have as a writer too. You are continually getting better until the day you die. Right. So embrace that and love it. That's part of the journey too. And I know, David, you mentioned a couple of organizations that are out there specifically regarding diversity and inclusion. In general, do all of you find that, especially after our conversation was so much about the getting networked, being able to have that opportunity to ask for help or get your name out there, do you find that it's full of additional hurdles if you happen to be a creative from the BIPOC community? And if so, is it getting better? I think you're all thinking on that. That makes me feel good. The fact that there's not just a, yeah, you know, it sucks for us, or, oh no, it's perfect. The fact that we have to ponder on it, you know, I'm curious to what about it are you noodling on? You know? Well, it is getting better, but for the most part, it's getting better because of our own collective efforts, not because, you know, all of a sudden the heavens are opening and people have gotten wiser at the top. I mean, look at the progress of what's happened since Oscars So Black, right, just a couple of years ago. The Academy just unrolled with big fanfare just a few days ago, their new diversity plan. And it's hopeful. There's some hopeful signs in it. But does it go far enough? I would say not only no, but hell no. Right. You know, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd give them maybe a 5,
Okay.
maybe a 5.5. So the effort is there. People are thinking.
Right.
But it takes a long time to undo things that have been out there, you know, causing harm and holding people back for a very long time.
Right.
And so, you know, it's a little bit like what happens once you get an agent. Often, you know, we get an agent and we feel like, oh man, okay, the pressure's off. I can relax now and let her get out there and hustle for me. But it's not like that at all.
Right.
Even when you have an excellent agent in your corner, you wind up doing 90% of the hustling yourself, just like it was before you got an agent.
Right.
Right. So I think what the hopeful thing for me is that I see people of color finding each other, reaching out, making connections, and really putting our shoulder to the wheel collectively to make things better. And that goes in tandem with the fact that now the industry can't say what it was saying all the time until very recent history, that, well, because probably most of our audience understands very well that when you get a feature film out there into the world, the deal can't even come together unless foreign pre-sales have been made.
Right.
One frame has even been shot. And the rap on Black focused material always was, well, international audiences are not interested in Black American.
Exactly.
Right? But now with the tremendous success of all the Black-oriented features that have blown up out there in the world over this last decade, they know they can't say that anymore. They know that's not true.
Right.
It's patently and obviously untrue. So that has definitely opened up some opportunity in the landscape for us to get our stories told, to get our stories out there, and to support each other in telling those stories. So I'm quite optimistic, really, but not because I believe the industry wants to do the right thing. People get dragged kicking and screaming into doing the right thing.
Right.
But we know what we want for all of us. And I see us out there pushing for it. So I'm quite hopeful.
And Alan, I know you had mentioned earlier Octavia's books that you would like to see as feature films, and I think Donna, you had maybe mentioned some things as well. Are there any works out there or any particular screenwriters that our audience should know about that you would consider like that milestone thing? Like, we will know that we have made or we have covered some new territory when X happens. Do you have anything kind of like that that comes to mind?
Actually, full disclosure, I have not seen Lovecraft Country yet.
Okay.
But I am fascinated by the concept because I started reading H.P. Lovecraft about just 6 months ago. And honestly, I got into 10 or so of his short stories and something didn't seem quite right. And so finally I Googled it and like, what's up with H.P. Lovecraft? I don't think he likes Black people. And so sure enough, just reams and reams about H.P. Lovecraft. And so I was disappointed and I found it happened. I had read 3 or 4 authors in a row where something didn't sit right. So I Googled it and I'm sure enough. But one thing is that genre, the horror / sci-fi genre, I did not realize has some elements of it that are very protective of the white male paradigm. And I was unaware of that until recently. But the fact that Lovecraft Country exists, I think is phenomenal because the creators clearly knew of H.P. Lovecraft's position on African Americans.
Yes, they did.
Yet they reclaimed that legacy of hatred and spun it in their own way, which I think it never dawned on me to take someone's dislike of our culture and our people and spit it out to them to our benefit. So it's folks like that. And I apologize, I can't remember her name. I think Lena is her first name, the young lady who's responsible for The Shy. And she's just kicking indoors. And I love what she's doing. We need that. She's getting us to that point that you're talking about, Ms. Shannon, about that's the pivotal point.
Good. And And
So-
I agree with you. I'm a blurred as well, but I don't normally do horror because my brain just use it to make me not sleep. So that is the reason I haven't watched it either. So I have friends and I love everything that they're saying about that as well, Alan. So I wish that I could watch it. I do watch Discovery though. And so I do think that there are some things with the Star Trek genre that we are doing. And I expect that from them. And so when they don't do better and best, I get kind of frustrated. So Donna, is there anything that you could think of that not only from a BIPOC culture, is there anything as, because, from the position of, getting more, I think that a lot of these conversations come back to female-driven properties as well, where they go, oh no, well, a female-driven movie can't, or if we do a remake that's this, nobody's going to watch it, and only these women, and I think it's layered on everything, because you get everything where it's like, well, not only is it a BIPOC property, it's a woman property, and then the ageism is layered on top of it, so we just don't make it. Can you think of some additional doors that need to be kicked down, or some properties that our audience should know about, Donna?
Well, there's
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, just to go back to the previous question about things changing and moving. There's always on different levels that things change. And the analogy that I like to make is that actually I make this to myself also, because so it doesn't come off as if I'm attacking other creatives and other screenwriters who have projects out there. And by that I mean, as creatives and in the position we are in the context of America, is that we're in war. And in war, there's the Army, the Navy, the Marines, Special Services. And the works that are not, some of us might think are not the most progressive type of works in the world, still are serving as the ground troops for people who want to do more progressive things.
Okay.
So I don't need to name the names of Tyler Perry. Oh no, so why don't you name the and all the stuff we've seen on mainstream television in the last 20 years. Now, I mean, and we champion their success, but within the context of progress in Hollywood, there's two main, I think, concepts that need to, or consciousness shifts need to happen.
Yeah.
And that Black people, Latino people, all people of all different, whatever description you might say, have to continue to love themselves more. Don't be crabs in a barrel in terms of their fight to make things happen. Don't allow this cliche, the system control. There's this balance between knowing what the reality of the system is that allows you to do certain works and then succumbing to that system. Now, when you would ask the question about, well, there's some works out there that you think would change or on the groundbreaking, and well, excuse my unhumble opinion, but everything I write is an attempt to do that. But not just for the sake of it, is just kind of the place that I come from. Because there's a lot of, as much as I see we're making progress in terms of using different genres to tell the subliminal stories of, our struggle and context within America, like Get Out, not within Hollywood now. They're comfortable with the Get Out, so that's the new framework. Okay, now there's Black horror, and it becomes a thing, blah, 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 blah. So now that's the thing that they want from the person who created that thing. So it has to be from Jordan Peele, okay? So it has to be from those group affiliated with that, and that stuff is great and dope, and that's one level. But in terms of the reality of getting projects made and speaking to people, too many projects in terms of Black creators who are in the mainstream of Hollywood still have the mentality of, I'm just happy to be there. Okay. And I get it. Everybody wants to eat and everyone wants to sleep and have this, that, and the other. And I get that. However, there's too many movies that I see that the production values and the ambition values are just the level of after-school specials. Okay. Now, to my opinion, my after-school specials is that they don't fight to be edgy. They don't fight to tell these bigger truths. They worry about, I have to tell the story within 120 minutes, that's because that's all they'll let us do. I had a meeting, a story I like to tell. I will leave out the names, though I'm always tempted to tell them. Okay, but and it wasn't with a and it would happen to be with a certain person of color, creative, who was looking into work, and when and we were discussing a project of mine, and he said, no, this is great, but it's kind of lofty, and he said, and quote, they don't allow us to be lofty.
Mm.
My answer to that was, well, I'm a lofty, shut your mouth, don't talk about Shafi. I'm a lofty mother.
Yeah.
You're right. Now, the meeting basically ended there, but I had to say it, okay?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, the reality is, though, we are, and this is and you get this from all writers, it's hard to be a white male writer. It's hard to be a writer, period,
Mm-hmm. But
race, color, and class is always the frosting on the cake of oppression. Don't steal my line, Alan. And Donna, you can. Okay.
Well, I'll steal that line.
Oh my God. That comedian got life.
That's a great line.
It is. It's fantastic. I'm gonna rewind it and I'm gonna put it on a bumper sticker.
Right?
How about a little less Martin and a little more Malcolm?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So, that's always, there's always going to be a struggle for whoever the writers are. So we understand that, but I think that we have to be more courageous ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, I think Alan was talking about where he had grown up and traveled the world, how that affected his growing up. I grew up in Brooklyn,
Mm-hmm.
New York. I live in Los Angeles, but it's a very nice place, but I never claim it. I still claim Brooklyn, New York. Thank you very much. St. James Place and Fort Greene. But anyway, so I claim, but the thing is, but I also grew up in Flatbush. When I grew up in Flatbush, 2 doors down from me was a synagogue. There was a Chinese family that lived 1 door over. And there was this mixture of, Hasis, Jamaicans, Cubans, Puerto Ricans, and Irish and Italian, okay? And whether I knew it or not, I didn't think about diversity. I just lived it. And everything I wrote was just in the context of that. That wasn't my, and even though I could have just, decided to stay in my box, maybe it was just the nature of me, just to always see myself in the context of the world.
Right.
And the thing I would hope for, it's a trap that, I think young Black writers and Latino writers and and women writers and of all, because we don't know much enough of our history. If all of us here, not all of us, because some of us look kind of young, particularly the women here, but all us old guys remember the Flintstones. If you were alive for the Flintstones and Bugs Bunny, there was reference to Bugs Bunny, then you know that we have been at this place before several times.
Right.
Okay? The revolution was supposed to happen in the 70s. The revolution was supposed to happen in the 90s, and now it's supposed to happen again now. And going back to the idea of speaking to young students, and you were saying how they know certain things and new tricks and that come up with stuff, is that we kind of keep having to reinvent the wheel creatively.
Mm-hmm.
And I see all these references to, again, about the 70s and the 80s, and it's so superficial. People, the young students, the writers, they need to really read more and watch some of those original films. There was even, one of the sponsors of this, Vuma TV, there was a documentary about Gil Scott-Heron, okay? If they had looked at that documentary of Gil Scott-Heron, everybody who thinks they're the coolest hip hop artists in the history of the world of mankind will see the definition of cool as Gil Scott-Heron walking down the street carrying these beatbox in Washington, D.C.
Right.
Everything, he was like, that was almost like seeing Louis Armstrong in 1932, because everything that came from, in that documentary when he's singing, there's a part in the documentary, Glenn Burns, he's singing Dinah or something, there's this fast song he sings. So he does this trumpet riff, but then he does an ad lib, and his ad lib, you can hear the history of bebop that comes 20 years later. And
right.
You Gil Scott-Heron, you see the history of hip hop that comes, everything that comes after that, from the way he walks to the, his syntax. So I went this long diatribe to say, to just say that the young writers and all of us, we need to know our history more. We need to love ourselves more and know that each of us have a different role in this army of change.
Right.
And a lot of us, especially those who are in positions of power, have to just stop being so happy to be there and accept the context in which they're defined.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Peter. I appreciate all that. And Donna, I come to you for this because I feel like maybe you and I have at least some similar commonality, because I feel like sometimes I'm glad that I got the gig, but I got it because they feel like they can check off 2 boxes. So if you
Never
feel like
happened to me.
they're like, as long as you're here and you act appropriate, then we can check off 2 boxes and we don't have to move on. So if you find yourself in that position, and first of all, I don't want to assume, so I'm asking, if you find yourself in that position, how do you make the most of it as a screenwriter?
So I would say, kind of to build on what Peter was saying, that I feel that, you know, we all have a different role to play in this army, and so of change. And one of the things that I feel is a benefit of not being part of the Hollywood machine or based in the West Coast and being firmly entrenched in the Midwest is that I get to have the opportunity to think outside of that box and say, you know, what I want to see is this, and be very pointed in my goals. This is a second career for me. So my kids are older, and I'm not as stressed about making the money to support them. And so I can focus clearly on projects that I want to work on, as opposed to, you know, just being happy to be there and, not that saying that needing the money or being young and wanting to go get it is anything wrong with that. But like Alan brought up, my big project I would love to adapt one of Octavia Butler's books. And when that happened, or N.K. Jemisin, I would say we are there, like we are getting there. And so I really want to be in a position to be in the room and make that happen, whatever that takes. And so as I'm working on projects or taking on projects, it's not always about the money or what the name can be. It's about, you know, my kids and your kids sitting in a room and watching these movies, and how do they feel when they walk out of that room? How do they feel about themselves? And so that's what drives me as a screenwriter, and what projects that I take on, and just networking with other creatives, which I found this community, my day job is not as giving as the creative community here in the Twin Cities, which isn't something that I thought it would be. But, and like David said, you can now, every obstacle that I have ever thought, I'm actually from Baltimore, long story how I ended up in Minneapolis, but being from Baltimore and being this kid, like I wanted to, you know, be the next Steven Spielberg and, you know, just George Lucas all the way. And it just seemed impossible. Like I was this little Black kid in Baltimore on the wrong side of the country. And now in the Midwest, at this part of my life, I'm just like, I can do that. I can, you know, I can check equipment out from Film North. I know people. I have classmates that we've shot films. Like I can do this. I don't have to know how to do everything or every aspect. I don't have to be a genius at editing, which I am not. I can, but I know someone who is, so I can do that. So that kind of excitement is what I bring into this army of change, and what motivates me to bring forth. And I'm always, like David was saying, any of the people that I've taken classes with or been in workshops with, I give my time freely to help out on their projects, films. I'm like the boom operator. I'll be doing anything that won't get in the way. But, you know, we all come together to do what we need to do. And I think that with social media and this time, it's easier to network and create those relationships that enable the projects that you want to go. And that's a whole lot.
Right.
that I just said. I hope I answered your question.
You did, you did. And as we start to pivot into the closing part of this episode of this roundtable, I want to make sure that we at least close on two questions. How can we support screenwriters in general in our BIPOC community? And then, of course, how can we support each of you individually? And I thank you again for being part of this panel. So let's start with, how can we support screenwriters in general, and how can we help build this community?
Well, I'll just say quickly, just on a personal level, that read, like your friends who are doing the work, and they say, because we all have those times, will you please read my work? I try to return that favor, and that's a big favor.
Right.
Just to read, read people's work, and then if you start with that, I think that's a good start. But just those writers who come to you, and if the first 5 pages they spell everything wrong, then you can stop reading and say, okay. but if they really, you see they have basis, then just the love that we were like shown in that.
Right.
They were talking about the same karma returned,
And do any of you have anything to add to that in general?
I would add on to Peter's point, the same point, which I think is just a huge point. Not only because you have someone who's reading your work, but because you have someone who has an idea of what you're going through during this process and what it's supposed to look like.
Okay.
There are plenty of people I come across that are happy to read my work, but not a lot of people understand script structure. Not a lot of people understand the inner workings of how a film is created. And so it's invaluable, especially to our younger people, to let them get some feedback from someone who understands, that can point and go, wow, you didn't really do much in the first 5 minutes. You didn't build this character and set them off on their journey as well in the first 15 as maybe you should have, but also let them know, don't be constrained by the first 15, but you got to understand that it's there before you can decide to ignore it. And all those little things, that's the benefit we, not only as screenwriters, but screenwriters of color, bring to the table. So we don't send these kids to David and have him pull his hair out because they've got all these bad habits.
Right.
Right. Network. Pay attention to what you see in your social network, and come out to readings. There's all the difference in the world when you're having a table reading of your screenplay and there are 8 people compared to that night when you do the same thing and you got 25 people.
Okay.
Trust me, it goes much better with 25 than with 8. And then you all have the additional benefit that you can network with each other during the break. You can network with each other when it's over. And, follow through when you say, right, you're going to contact somebody and you're going to sit down. It's just good training and preparation for jumping in with both feet and making an earnest and honest effort to do this professionally, right?
Wonderful.
There are so many opportunities here. We have a really large and rich creative community in general, but we also have a very large and rich creative community when it comes to all the various communities of color. People are here. We got to reach out to each other and connect and build some synergy where we can.
And so my final question, is there a good way for us to support each of you individually as you continue your work?
Reach out.
David's
point. We gotta be reaching out.
Okay, all right, slow down. Okay, let's start. Okay. Donna, you go first. Where's your website? How do I find you? Are you on social media? Did I make that question better? It was too profound. I phrased it profoundly. Okay, I'll back up. Donna, what's your website? How do people hire you if they want to? What are you looking for right now?
Oh, I do not have a website right now. I'm working on revamping it. So I have reached out to Mr. Grant a couple of times over the years, and he has always answered my call and
Perfect.
talked to me.
I love
So,
that.
and I return that favor. I pay it forward to anybody who calls me.
Perfect.
So I think that is, to David's point,
Mhm.
not ignoring the business side of screenwriting, because we do, as writers, envision just sitting and typing up our script. There is a business side to it. There is a networking side to it. It's not as hard as you think it is when you have great people to network with and make it as painless as possible. So
Perfect. All right, Donna. So we'll Google you in about 6 months, and I'm sure you'll have a super flashy website by then.
yes.
So Peter, I'll go to you next. So all right, Peter, what's the best thing? Are we looking for your music right now? Or are we looking for different screenwriting projects?
Oh, no, the music is secondary right now.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there's we have several projects in development that are close.
Wonderful.
But I think the thing we could do for each other, and I'm kind of waiting to one of them, goes to that next place before we start the flashy website to
Yep.
hang with Allens. But I think that we could do for one another is exchange informations, emails and contents and whatever works, or we want to bounce off one another. I know several of the projects. I'm making this vow right now. Maybe I'm not in a position to do it, but I would say that certain of the projects I'm working on are television projects,
Mhm.
in which will require writers and people of similar vision and ilk. So I want everybody's information. I want to read everybody's work who's here and
Perfect.
say, hey, when we're building this writers team for these television series, I'm like, oh, Donna got this guy, David got Alan,
Yep.
so that's how I think, when we build our staffs, we're meeting fellow writers here. So we don't have to say, oh, I wish I knew some good writers, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So this is just on a personal level to build from there, that we exchange each other's numbers and information and see what each other's doing on a more intimate level, or in terms of our
Right.
work, and just take it from there.
I
Definitely
always
able
look
to do
forward to
that.
those moments, always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Grant, do you have any courses that are coming up soon? Can we find you any place?
Well, the new fall season of classes at Film North begins in October.
Okay.
And so people can certainly check out Film North's website and see what's on offer. I'm going to do my one-day seminar in mid-October on writing better film dialogue. But I'm teaching both beginning and advanced classes there. I also teach regularly with Minnesota Prison Writing Workshop, but
Oh.
due to COVID, we've been locked out of those facilities until, probably a year, things get better. But, I'm co-writing a feature film script with one of my former students, which we're in the final rewrite stage now. It's called Pick a Side. And so we're getting ready to launch that out there into the world. And I
Wonderful.
just got hired to write a documentary series called It's Time, that was sparked by the murder of George Floyd. So I'm up to my eyeballs in research on
Right.
Police brutality around the country over the last several decades, and but very specifically the ins and outs of what happened with George Floyd, and we'll be following the trials very closely and writing about all of that. So,
Right.
I've got a lot on my plate just with that alone.
Right. Well, congratulations on all that. Unfortunately, we live in a world where I feel like you'll get lots of material again before things get better. So thank you for doing that, Mr. Grant. And Mr. Porter, Alan W. Porter, I know you have a website. Let's start with that and then talk about anything that you have that's going on that's exciting right now.
Unfortunately, the web series is a little bit on hold because of COVID. I can't shoot anything. So I am revisiting my second script, which I was fortunate enough to win a McKnight for. But one of my biggest criticisms of the script has always been my main character was not particularly interesting. It's one of those situations where the side characters are fun, but the main person is sort of the straight guy. So he's not particularly interesting. Then, much to my horror, I realized, oh, that's because he has my personality. I got to do something about this. So I'm kind of a laid back guy, and I'm like, he needs something. So at one point, I just said, you know what? I'm going to make him, because it's an African-American man in a small Minnesota town trying to figure out who killed the mayor.
Okay.
So he's a fish out of water, quintessential. And I said, I want to keep this a person of color, but I'm going to make this a black woman who's a lesbian. And then I didn't change anything else. And I sat back and said, what did this do to the dynamics? She is far and away more interesting than my original character ever was.
You put a little sriracha in that, Alan. You put a little sriracha in that character. That's how you need it.
Yeah, everything.
That's how it is.
Yeah,
Everything's a little more interesting. So I wrote it to be shot for about $100,000.
Okay.
Originally.
And that's wonderful. I appreciate having that, you know, from the perspective of a lot of things that I speak from, having a variety of inclusion on all of those things as well, and that representation. I applaud you for doing that. So
especially in
well
that setting. So
yeah.
But so I'm back on that and trying to figure out how we can revisit this and trying to be a good Minnesotan. I set everything these days in Minnesota because I think we got enough going on here to keep us busy. So
I agree with you. I agree with you. So I appreciate all of you. I can't wait to hear about all of your projects. I'm sorry that we only had an hour because now even just having you guys wrap up, I have so many more questions. So please tell me that if I ask you to come back on for another roundtable, you'll all join me again.
certainly.
Perfect.
In a heartbeat.
Perfect. So we appreciate everybody who's been part of this and everybody who is watching this, our second Empower Roundtable brought to you by Vuma TV. Always go to our website as well. You can get great information about the Twin Cities Film Festival. Follow us at twincitiesfilmfest.org, including our incredible festival that's coming up October 22nd through October 31st. Although part of it is virtual, some of it will be in person. I hope that we have a lot of ways for all of you, our guests today, to be part of that film festival as well. So thank you, Donna Mosley, Peter Lord Moreland, Alan W. Porter, and of course, David Loris Grant. We appreciate you all, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, everybody, we'll be in touch.